Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be looking at our first weekly meta breakdown for the new standard best of 3 traditional standard best decks video with the new set Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So we are about 4 days into the format, still relatively new. The focus of this video is going to be particularly focusing on new decks or decks that existed that are trying out new cards to see what's working in that capacity. Some of the older decks, you know, your domains, your blue-black X mid-range decks, still doing well. We're not going to really focus on those stock lists. I really want to focus this video, especially because it's early days, just what people are trying, what's working out, and especially if there's any sort of new decks. Kind of want to put our focus in that respect. We're going to be looking at Untapped GG, what you see on the screen, as well as we had some MTGO results as well that came up with the MTGO challenges and stuff like that. So we are going to be taking a look at that as well. So we will kind of focus on in that regard. I'll paste all the deck lists. If you want to use Untapped, link is in the video description. I'll timestamp the deck list so you can kind of go from there. And then I'll link all the MTGO leagues and challenges. So if you want to take a look, there's a lot of deck lists there as well. Really, this is to give you a huge kind of dump of data, information, things that you might want to try out for the new format, kind of leading up. If you want to play in the tournament tomorrow, there's the Pizza Box Open on Sunday, the 21st. That will be new standard. You can register for that on MTG Melee. I will likely be commentating the top 8 of that as well. So if you want to get a go, kind of try out these new decks, see what might work, definitely check that out. So before we jump into it, just a reminder, you can see in the top right-hand corner, trying to hit 15,000 subs on the channel. Free to sub to the channel, help support. So if you like this metagame content, we're going to be covering every format on Arena as soon as the data comes out, best of 1, best of 3. Give you all the kind of stats, all the ideas to kind of help elevate your game, to know what the trends are in terms of the meta, stuff like that. As well as always, like I say, likes and comments help out the channel and appease the algorithm overlords. So we will jump into it. We're going to look Platinum to Mythic so far. Popularity today. Now, you always consider a deck could be popular, might not be the most effective, and vice versa. Wildcard constraints, access to new cards. The new set is particularly hard to collect because there's all these big score mythics that are like impossible to get. They're like 0.5% to actually get the cards. So that's one constraint in just terms of resources with people accumulating cards. But Golgari midrange at the most popular at 9.2, Esper midrange at 8.2, Boros Convoke, and the Temur midrange in the mid-7s. So it's relatively flat with nothing in double digits, which is kind of encouraging to see. You actually see some Is It Pirates kind of jumping up in terms of the win rates. But relatively speaking, like if we look going into the set, we had Temur midrange at kind of the high point at about 15%. Even going back, like we see Boros Convoke upwards of 20%. So more of a flattening early on, which is encouraging. Nothing really standing out as like by far the best. Like if we looked at, say, past standards, even going back to like the original Eldraine Zendikar, where the Omnath Adventure deck was like by and far the best thing that I had to get banned so early. Nothing kind of shooting out as absolutely busted to start off with. So we're going to look and start off relatively small sample sizes. It's only been a couple days. So we're looking April 16th through the 20th. So only 4 days worth of data. We have 19,000 games of Magic played. I just put the cap to 35 games minimum with the deck list just to get a little bit more decks. You can see like even at the 100 match count, there's only 2 decks that show up, which isn't like a huge volume thus far. Usually you want like a week to 2 weeks. We also have the Pro Tour next week, so that should give us some more idea in terms of the best decks. But we have mono black skeletons actually at the highest win rate so far from Untapped, at least on ladder data, 68%. So what did we get with this deck? Well, Cult's Conscript was always here, but now we got his friend in Forsaken Miner, another 1 mana 2/2 recursive threat, which means you have 8 creatures that could come back. Now, notably, this only activates if a non-skeleton creature you control dies, so at times it could be a little bit of a non-bow. So this comes back whenever you commit a crime, so pretty easy to enable. You have things like cut downs, bitter triumphs, go for the throats, all those ways to commit crimes. Insatiable Avarice is basically a tutor or a draw 3 for 3 in an aggressive deck, which is pretty nice. You have Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, so full 4 of here, Skeleton Rogue, that can let you play cards out of your opponent's graveyard, and then even just targeting commits a crime, so it's a way to get back your Forsaken Miner. Gix as a way to get some card advantage. You have 12 1-drops here. Then you also have Corpse of the Lost from Ixalan set. So 3 mana, your skeletons get +1/0 in haste. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 2/2 skeleton, and then at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, so permanent is put into graveyard, notably not a token. You can return, so you can pay a life, and then you can return the corpse to its hand. So you kind of rebuy it and get some value there. Kind of bounce it and keep playing it over and over again. Now this is, you may pay a life, there's no way to kind of target with a crime. Dross, Shieldred, Gix Command on the top end, and then some Mishra's Foundry in the mana base. Sideboard, just removal options, Duress in here for hand hate, Stone Brain for any sort of combo hate. I don't know if I necessarily want Stone Brain. I would probably just play Soul Guide Lantern or something like that. Liliana for the grindier matchups. You have Nightclubber for the Convoke or Toxic matchups, and then a new card in Harvester of Misery. So this is one of the big score cards that's pretty hard to get. Like I pulled one in draft. It was like my pack one pick one, just to kind of get it out of the way. But 5 mana, 5/4. When it enters the battlefield, other creatures get -2/2, so kind of a Massacre Worm effect. But it can also be discarded for 2 mana and just be early removal. So it's just some flexibility there. Good against like the go wide decks again. Moving on, we have mono green. Mono green in these economic times, 67%. And what is this deck trying to do? Well, it's kind of a pseudo ramp lands matter deck without being like the big Temur Fireball style strategy. You have the new card in Smuggler's Surprise, so another spree card. So green +2, mill 4 cards. You may put up to 2 creatures or land from among the milled cards into your hand. So some card advantage. For 6 mana, yeah, you can put 2 creature cards from your hand into the battlefield, and then for +1, creatures you control with 4+ power get hexproof and indestructible to end a turn. So protection, and then kind of pseudo tooth and nail-esque ability from the card itself. Hard hitting question is removal. So this one here is using like the Aftermath Analyst package with various of the new Capenna lands, so it gets you some life, and then also lets you ramp. So kind of value there. You have like the Sandstorm Verge for unblockable being a desert. You have that. You have Awaken the Woods to make you a bunch of forest tokens that also helps you ramp. So casting this becomes a lot easier. Then you also have Bristly Bill Spine Sours. So landfall creature, which plays very nice with these landfall cards, or these kind of fetchy-esque lands, because it gets you 2 triggers. So whenever a land enters battlefield, you put a counter on target creature, and then for 5 mana, you can double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control, which is pretty nice, all things considered. Gets you really big. Flourishing Bloomkin, just a big beater. You have the Nissas that we see in like the Temur ramp decks. Pelucranos is another big creature. Archer's Charm, just flexibility, finds you a land, gets you counters to and deals damage, or exiles artifact or enchantment. New card in Colossal Rattleworm. So it can have flash as long as you control a desert. Now, notably, this deck is only playing a single desert in Sandstorm Verge, but for the most part, it's 4 mana, 6/5. And then you can exile it from your graveyard and kind of ramp up 1 there. I would see if it's possible to play any more deserts just for a little value. It's just unlikely to hit the 1/4. Vorinclex to find you lands, Cityscape Leveler, Port of Phyrexia, and then Nissa kind of Awaken the Woods combo on the top end. Sideboard, just more removal, protection, token kind of removal for like the aggressive decks. You can kind of take this up to 0, 1, whatever it may be relative to hit the various creatures and like Convoke, Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment, Life Gain Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Life Gain, again discard, and then some big mana threats as well as needed. So kind of sweet deck there. We have Temur Prowess, 63%. So this is kind of the blue-red shell that's also playing Audacity and Questing Druid for card advantage, but this is a version of the Slick Shot show-off deck that we're going to see quite a bit. This is one of the breakout cards across various formats. I'm very upset I didn't get to buy them when they were $12, and now they're like $30. I'm waiting for my buy list to process, and it took too long. But you're playing a kind of Tempo Prowess shell. You have Elusive Otter that can get bigger. Swiftspear, Codebreaker, Questing Druid, and Show Off. Then you have card advantage, considers, you have pump effects, burn effects, slick sequence as a way to deal damage, draw you some cards as well. So kind of like a tempo burn card advantage deck. Sideboard and the festivities for Go Wide, Lithomantic Barrage for blue-white, Spell Pierce for some protection, in a way, counter, negates, Graveyard Hate, Big Thing Hates. The one thing I wouldn't mind seeing in this deck as well is there's like Blossoming Defense style effects, just the 1 mana, protect your creature, give it hexproof and a pump for green. I think that would be a reasonable inclusion. Even maybe over some slick sequence. Spell Pierce can at times protect, but also against like some of the bigger mana decks, stuff like that, might not be as effective. Big bonus to this deck is both the access to Spire Bluff Canal and Botanical Sanctum as well. Moving on, Boros Heroic, so this deck's pretty fun to play as well, so 55%. So another Codebreaker deck, this one with Illuminator Virtuoso. Played a version of this in Best of 1, and it can smack hard and smack fast. Turn 3 kills are quite feasible, just like pumping up Virtuoso with like the plot style effects. Monstrous Rage for trample, Ancestral Anger for trample, put counters with Homestead Courage, Lauren Escape for protection, bunch of prowess creatures, Demonic Ruckus is another way to give pseudo evasion, and trample as well, and then Inspiring Vantage, a big inclusion in the mana base. Sideboard, just again, removal options, Surge of Salvation for protection, Get Lost removal. The best of 1 version I was playing was on Angel Fire main, which puts out huge amounts of damage. Crimson Vow Case for card advantage, and then Witch Stalker for more removal. So standard leagues. So we had a number of standard leagues. I'm just going to kind of go over high level what was being seen. There's the Fugitive Codebreaker deck. So this one's pretty much mono red splash green for Questing Druid. This one's more, I would say, all in. You have Twin Inferno for double strike, Play with Fire, Monstrous Rage. You have the full Ruckus in there as well. Sideboard, just like grind your elements in case here, and the festivities, Pick Your Poison, which is a great card, and then some Strangles as removal. Wouldn't mind seeing even the like various, there's the new 2 mana deal 5 to a creature, or Obliterating Bolt, just a couple numbers of those as well can be a little useful, just to have against slightly bigger creatures. Like Golgari, the black base decks have a bunch of 4 toughness creatures, or Shieldred, stuff like that. We also had like Domain come up here. Nothing really new with this other than Pest Control seeing play in this deck. So just main board answer to a lot of the aggressive decks that has pretty low downside because you could just cycle it onto, which this deck doesn't usually have a lot of plays onto anyways, so it just gives you some advantage there. So we're seeing basically a full play set between main board and sideboard. In terms of the Boros Convoke decks, we are seeing some of them play the 1 mana fairy. I'll find a list with that lets you kind of bounce a creature back to your hand. And then obviously the Inspiring Vantage is a huge upgrade to this deck. So we had that from that standard league. We had the standard challenge. So Esper midrange, well, in addition to getting new updates in terms of the lands, the remaining of the fast lands, also is seeing some copies of Duelist of the Mind, full play set. The Nathan Stoyer card plays really nicely with Rafine since you're drawing and discarding. That pumps up a lot of its power, and it has Vigilance. You also have some Tiny Bones in here. Tishana's main. Lord Skitter's kind of cool because each turn it targeting the graveyard counts as a crime, so it works with both Fairy Mastermind, which is really nice. So kind of cool curve there. Seeing Get Lost, pretty much the same kind of counter package there. Nothing crazy in the sideboard. Another kind of version, we have the blue-white. Nothing really different here. This is a pretty stock list, all things considered. We see a Pest Control actually in the side. So Pest Control is a card that's seeing some play. Nurturing Pixie is the card I was mentioning. So it's a 1-drop, so you can pick up your other 1-drops or like cards that even pick up your Imidane's Recruiter to kind of reset the haste. Seems pretty sweet. Legion Extruder is a cool new card as well. So basically it's an artifact that deals 2 damage, and then you can sacrifice it to make a golem, but it just gives you another target as well for Gleeful Demolition. So think of it as like a bad shock that's also can make you 3 tokens on the backside. And worst case just makes you a 3/3, which is pretty big. So kind of some flexibility there. So nothing like crazy. Legion Extruder in the sideboard. We have like the blue-black kind of decks in here, the Esper decks, nothing, Duelist of the Mind again in here. So nothing like crazy. The only other deck that you might see, like this is a Rakdos kind of Inti deck that's playing Tiny Bones, a copy of Shoot the Sheriff in here. So just like various, like the leagues have been like really, actually this one's got the new Jite, copy of Lost Jite in this blue-black deck. So give you some value there of the enchantment. Mono red, pretty stock as well, nothing like crazy included. We see blue-white controlled High Noon, just players can't cast more than one spell a turn and can be used as removal. They're splashing some Jeskai colors. This is full Jeskai, 3 steps ahead in here. Oh yeah, so this is Jeskai, so it's got some Lightning Helix in there as well. In terms of like various removal, Planeswalker is going to be your win condition along with the lands. Kind of cool there, and then we're just getting into like the lower cases. The only other deck that you might see in terms of play, I'm just going to pull this up, is there's an Annie Legends deck that player Wappa has been playing a lot. We played it on the channel as well. There's a video on it. They got 2 5-0s on MTGO. So it's a Slogurk deck that you're kind of using the channel line, stuff like that. But you're playing like the new Tiny Bones in here. You have Honest Redstein, which is really sweet. That gets you cards back and reduces the cost. Relic to kind of tap on tap stuff. Annie joins up, doubles your ETB effects, or doubles your trigger effects. So like Inti gets 2 effects, your Rona gets 2 untapped effects, like Shieldra gets 2 life gain or drain effects, Urtai gets 2 removal effects, Bonnie in here gets you 2 draw effects, technically gets you 2 legendary Ox, but 1 dies, and it's just 5 damage to creatures, so it could deal with Shieldred as well, which is pretty sweet. So this deck was a lot of fun. This deck's hard to play. I know Ali Eldrazi is playing a variation of it and had like an 80% win rate over like 30 games. It was doing like really well with it in Mythic as well. But that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.